So it can feel really confusing sometimes when your partner doesn't trust you and you haven't done anything that you feel is significant enough to breach that trust. You haven't cheated, you haven't shouted, you haven't raised your voice, but for some reason your partner has developed this distrust for you and it's getting worse. In this video, I'm going to break down the 3 toxic roles that secretly destroy trust in a relationship. I'm going to break them down one by one. I'm going to talk about how they interact, and I'm going to talk about how to break out of them. So trust sometimes isn't broken in one fell swoop. In fact, it's usually broken in many, many different interactions. And oftentimes this can be falling into a certain role within the relationship. Sometimes these roles can have good intent, but they break down trust over time. And these 3 main roles form what we call the drama triangle. And it's really important to understand the drama triangle, how it forms, in order to be able to break out of it. So like I said, there are 3 main roles when it comes to the drama triangle. The first is the victim role. So I've actually spoken about this in a deep dive, which I'll link to on the screen and in the description down below. But the victim role is where you feel powerless, you feel hopeless, or you feel overwhelmed by the relationship. In this victim role, you end up refusing to take responsibility for your role in the situation. You feel like a passive victim of the entire relationship. And this can end up leaving you seeking attention or sympathy rather than actually finding solutions. And this comes from a place of fear. Fear of taking accountability, fear of failing, fear of the relationship getting worse. What can end up happening is when you fall into this role, you can end up guilt-tripping others into taking action on your behalf. So for example, if you find yourself feeling, I never get any help from my partner. The relationship weight is all on my shoulders. I never catch a break. These are the type of thoughts that happen when you're in a victim role. And the next is the persecutor role. This is more of an active participant. This is kind of a fighting role. The core belief of this is that it's your partner's fault. So this is where you blame, you criticize, or you punish others. When you fall into this role, you end up seeking control through kind of dominance or intimidation. This is where you kind of rule by fear. And a lot of us guys can fall into this role in the relationship where we fall into this overly critical role to try and that ends up punishing our partner for doing something wrong. And we try to gain respect, not by earning it, but by intimidating our partner into that. When we fall into this role, this is where we feel superior, but most of the time it actually masks an insecurity or a vulnerability. Underneath all of this usually is the fear of being exposed as weak or flawed, as we all are. We all have our own vulnerabilities. And when we fall into this overly active, masculine persecutor role, it usually comes from fear. Right? What can happen when we fall into this role is that we can end up shaming or overpowering, our partner, whether it's verbally or emotionally, in order to maintain control in a situation, in order to maintain control within a conversation or in the relationship. So for example, you end up blaming your partner for the struggles in the relationship. You're saying, this is all your fault. This is because you have undiagnosed ADHD. This is because you are a toxic person. This is because you cheated on me. When you fall into this persecutor role, this is the type of thing that comes out of your mouth and enters your mind as you fall into that role. And then finally, there's the rescuer role. And this rescuer role feels like it's coming from a good place. It feels like it's a very Hollywood thing to do. This is where we end up trying to save our partner. We save our partner's mental health. We save them from toxic people. We save them from all of these difficult situations in their life. This behavior is where we can kind of overhelp, or we can intervene. We can step in and fight battles for our partner, even when our help isn't really wanted. The rescue role is where we kind of seek validation from solving other people's problems. We become this fixer, trying to fix everything around us, including the person that we love, right? It feels like a very nice thing to do. It's what the movies tell us. It's what a lot of us have grown up believing, that you become, especially as a guy, you become this provider. You pay for everything, you do everything, you're the fixer to fix everything with your partner. But oftentimes this can end up being avoiding our own issues, our own difficulties, our own challenges, because we focus on rescuing our partner. And it comes from this fear of being unimportant, being irrelevant. It comes from this need of trying to make sure that we have some relevance within the relationship. And oftentimes, as men, we can focus on rescuing in exactly the wrong way, which is like, paying the mortgage for the house or buying gifts and things like that. All of these things that we feel should be important and will keep our partner around, but ultimately it is done in the wrong way. The problem with this role is that it actually enables a dependency on you. The more that you overgive, you try to save your partner and have them rely on you for everything, the more they end up depending on you. because you're doing everything for them. You're fighting their battles for them. You're solving their problems for them. You're not empowering them to fix them themselves. You're not helping them to find their own solutions. You're actually solving it for them. And this is why this role becomes so toxic, because it builds a dependency, and that's not healthy. You don't want someone to depend on you. You want someone to want to be in a relationship with you. So for example, if you're always jumping in being like, let me take care of this. I'll take care of this for you. I'll buy you this. I'll sort this out for you. This is an example of falling into this rescuer role. And these three can feed into each other quite significantly. And it's not just yourself that can fall into these roles. This works the other way around too. So as an example, if your partner has fallen into the victim role, then you can fall into the rescuer role. So for example, if they're feeling down, they're feeling sad, they're feeling like they don't have any control in their lives, and they're falling into this victim mindset, you can fall into the habit of trying to help them by doing everything for them, by fixing their problems, by taking things off their plate, by fighting their battles for them. And what happens is that this can disempower them even more, because you're overly helping, not supporting them and helping them find their own way out of the situation. Or for example, if they're falling into the persecutor role, they're blaming you, they're shouting at you, they're being very controlling with you, you can fall into the victim role, saying to yourself, well, I can't do this anymore because they're being mean, they're disrespecting me, they don't love me. And you can end up disempowering yourself by falling into this victim role. So when these roles happen, the knock-on effect is usually the other person can end up falling into the toxic role too. That's why toxic relationships are never just one person being toxic and the other person being absolutely fine. It's usually both people feeding into two different toxic roles and getting worse and worse over time. So how can we switch away from drama to empowerment? And just before I jump into this, obviously there's only so much that I can dive into it, but if you do want a deeper dive into relationships, how they work and how to repair them, then join me on my relationship bootcamp. But you'll learn the same steps and tools that all of my members use to start repairing their relationships. Just click on the link in the description to grab your spot. This triangle on the right is what we call the empowerment triangle. So the triangle on the left is the drama triangle, and we shift over to the empowerment triangle. So this may look a little bit complicated right now, but I assure you it's very, very simple, because it's really important to break out of this cycle in order to create a healthy relationship. These toxic roles are toxic for a reason. They're very extreme. If they're not caught in time, these can feed back into themselves and create a lot more drama within the relationship to a toxic level. And that's why it's called the drama triangle. It's because it feeds back into itself and it causes all of this unnecessary drama within the relationship. So what do we do? Well, it depends on which role you fall into. So for example, if you've been falling into the victim role, you need to start to shift over to what we call the creator role. So the creator role, the core belief of that is that I have the power to choose and create my outcomes. This is all about getting out of this disempowered state and choosing to create your outcomes within the relationship. So this is taking responsibility for your situation, for your relationship, for what is going on in your life, and actively seeking solutions. This is focusing on the possibilities rather than the problems. This is about overcoming the things that are in your way and not sitting there and being a passive victim of the whole world around you. So this is seeing these challenges that you come across in the relationship, these discords, as opportunities for growth. Every disconnect within a relationship has the opportunity to be turned into a growth opportunity for both of you. So this is a real mindset shift. In order to shift from victim to creator, instead of feeling helpless, the creator role, you ask, what do I want? What do we need? What steps can I take in order to achieve it? This is putting the power back into your own hands in order to shift the dynamic of your relationship. So for example, if you are in the victim mindset, this is where you would be thinking, I can't do anything about this. I can't do anything about our relationship. It's doomed. It's toxic. It's terrible. When you're the creator, this is shifting to a place of, what actions can I take in order to influence this situation, in order to change the dynamics of the relationship, in order to bring us to a healthier place? If you've fallen into the persecutor role, if you're in a critical mode, if you're constantly pushing your partner to change and you're taking a very controlling role, you can shift over to what we call the challenger role. And this is where the core belief of the challenger role is being able to inspire growth and accountability. So this is not about letting your partner off the hook, about doing things. This is still taking the core of any concerns that you have in the relationship or difficulties or thinking that there's a better way of doing things. But instead, this is challenging in a constructive and respectful way. So this is being able to provide honest feedback to help your partner to learn and grow. But it encourages self-reliance and resilience, not dependency. So this is being able to shift, instead of blaming your partner and dominating them, The challenger comes from a place of, how can I support my partner in facing the difficulties that they're having and being able to empower themselves? So the difference in the persecutor role is the persecutor would come at things saying, you're incompetent, you're stupid, you're terrible, you're an awful partner. This is all your fault. When you come from the challenger role, this is more of a place of, I can see that this has been a struggle. What do you need in order for us to be able to move forward in this? This is helping to guide the relationship into a healthy place without placing blame or over criticism onto your partner. And if you've fallen into the rescuer role, you can shift over to the coach role. The core belief of the coach role is simply empowering others to solve their own problems, giving them the autonomy and the encouragement to be able to solve these problems by themselves without you jumping in and solving them for them. So when you're in this role, this is more about asking questions to guide your partner towards their own solutions, helping them by asking them questions, helping them come to their own conclusions, and allowing them to take accountability for their own outcomes. So when you're in the coach role, this is encouraging autonomy instead of fixing or over-helping. This isn't you jumping in and taking over. This is you encouraging your partner to make their own free choices, but being there to support them in those choices, whatever choices they are. So this is staying supportive without overstepping or simply enabling behavior which is troublesome within the relationship. This is a real mindset shift. This is, instead of stepping in to save your partner, the coach is coming from a place of, how can I help my partner to take ownership of their situation? So for example, if your partner is having trouble in work, instead of saying, well, you just need to speak to your boss, this is coming from a place of, have you thought about talking to your boss about this? What do you think their opinion would be of this? This is helping to empower them to overcome their problems by themselves without assuming that your solution is the best or fixing it for them. This is all about fostering a growth-oriented relationship. Breeding this healthier dynamic helps you to break your relationship out of codependency, out of toxic arguments and cycles, and it encourages collaboration as well as self-growth and accountability. When I've worked with members before and they've started to identify the patterns within the relationship and how they've been falling into some of these roles in the way that they've acted, the way that they've interpreted the world, recognizing these patterns is only the first step. Doing something about them is the next step. That is shifting your mindset to a more empowering mindset. But it can be very difficult to dig yourself out of this victim role. But it can be done in this simple way. Taking yourself from the drama triangle to the empowerment triangle helps you to break out of this role. It helps you to see where your weak spots are and being able to jump into a different role, into a more empowering role that can encourage a healthier relationship dynamic between you both. But this shift takes time. It takes time and it takes effort. We've spoken a little bit about expectancy bias on this channel, which is when your relationship has fallen into a toxic cycle. Even as you shift out of these patterns, your partner can still stay there for a little while and they can still expect you to be acting in a toxic way, and they can even act like you're acting in that toxic way even when you're not, in order to subconsciously shift the relationship back into what your partner already knows. And this isn't against your partner. This is a normal human psychological phenomenon. This happens within everyone. We all have our own expectancy bias and our own actions that forces us to push a relationship in a certain direction, at least for a little while. So it's important to understand how expectancy bias forms and how to break out of it as well. So if you do want that deeper dive into expectancy bias, then I'll link to it on the screen and I'll see you over there.